"Get your black ass out of this seat. You do not belong here. I have every right to be here. Not in my section. Get out. Moving." "Who do you think you are?" "Oh, what was that for? You can't just do whatever you want. I didn't mean for this to happen." She grabbed his collar and screamed, "Get off this plane before I call the cops." He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just looked at her with eyes that had seen worse things than her anger. She slapped him so hard the sound bounced off every wall in that cabin. He touched his jaw. Then he said 4 words so quiet she had to lean in to hear them. "You just lost everything." 8 minutes later, she was begging on the tarmac, "Let me take you back to where this started." It was 6:40 in the morning at Van Nuys Airport in Los Angeles. The sky was still gray, that heavy kind of gray that comes before the sun decides to show up. The tarmac smelled like cold fuel and wet concrete. Ground workers moved between jets in orange vests, their breath coming out in small white clouds. At the far end of the private terminal, a man stepped out of a black SUV alone. No assistant, no driver holding a sign, no security trailing behind him. Just him. A worn gras, white hoodie, dark joggers, white sneakers that had seen better days, a single duffel bag over one shoulder, and a phone in his hand. His name was Damon Okafor. If you search that name, you'd find almost nothing. No interviews, no magazine covers, no social media presence worth mentioning. Just a quiet LinkedIn profile with a job title that said almost nothing about what he actually controlled. Damon was 49 years old. He grew up in Compton. His mother cleaned office buildings at night and took the bus home before sunrise. His father left when Damon was 6. He won a partial scholarship to Cal State, worked 2 jobs through college, graduated with honors, and spent the next 22 years building Crestline Group from a small freight brokerage into a $3.8 billion logistics and infrastructure company with contracts across 9 states. He didn't look like any of that. He dressed that way intentionally. Always had. Damon believed something most wealthy people never bothered to test. Strip away the suit and the watch and the car, then see how people treat you. That's the truth of who they are. He walked through the private terminal, nodded to the woman at the front desk. She waved him through without asking for ID. She checked him in over 40 times. Out on the tarmac his aircraft sat waiting. A Gulfstream G600, tail number CREST, $58 million of precision engineering, registered under Crestline Group. Damon was the sole owner. He managed it through a charter company called Apex Skies Aviation, which handled crew scheduling, maintenance, and all ground operations. He climbed the air stairs. The cabin door opened. That familiar smell hit him first. Cool leather, polished walnut, a trace of cedar from the air system. The interior was navy and cream. 4 wide seats in the main cabin, a work table with embedded screens, a private sleeping area behind a frosted glass partition at the rear. Damon settled into his regular seat, window side, second row. He put his duffel on the seat beside him, pulled out his phone, and started reviewing acquisition documents. He was flying to Atlanta to close a $280 million purchase of a regional infrastructure company. Just another Tuesday for a man who built things quietly and let the numbers speak. Now, let me introduce the other person in this story, Renee Fulton, 46 years old, senior flight attendant with Apex Skies Aviation, 14 years at the company, red hair pulled back sharp, pressed uniform, a smile thin enough to cut glass. Among her co-workers, Renee had a reputation. The professional version was demanding. The honest version, whispered in crew lounges and airport shuttles, was something harder to say out loud. A pattern had been noticed over the years. Renee treated passengers of color differently. Shorter patience, longer stares, colder voice. 3 formal complaints had been filed against her. One from a black doctor on a charter to Houston. One from a Latino family on a New Year's flight. One from a young black woman traveling alone for a job interview. All 3 investigated. All 3 closed. No action taken. This morning Renee was not supposed to be on this flight. Her regular assignment had been grounded due to a mechanical issue. She was reassigned to the Van Nuys charter 20 minutes before boarding. She arrived hurried. She did not review the passenger manifest. She did not check the client file. She walked onto the jet, stepped into the main cabin, and saw Damon Okafor sitting in the owner's suite. A black man in a hoodie and worn sneakers sitting in the most expensive seat on the aircraft. Her smile died. Iz appeared. Her back went straight. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't ask who he was. She didn't check the system. She didn't call the front desk. She assumed, and that assumption was about to unravel her entire life. Renee didn't walk toward Damon. She marched. heels clicking hard against the cabin floor like she was counting down to something. She stopped directly in front of him. No greeting, no warmth. She crossed her arms and looked down at him the way you look at something that doesn't belong. I'm going to need to see your boarding documentation. Not a question, an accusation wearing professional clothing. Damon looked up from his phone. He didn't react to her tone. He opened the Apex Skies app and held the screen toward her. The charter confirmation showed his name, the flight number, the tail number, today's date. Renee glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds. Then she tilted her head and made a short sound through her nose, a laugh that wasn't a laugh. A booking confirmation doesn't tell me you're authorized for this section. She said this section like the words tasted expensive. Damon put his phone down. His voice was flat and even. I'm exactly where I should be. Renee's jaw tightened. Look, I don't know what mix-up happened at the front desk, but this is the owner's suite. It's reserved. There are standard seats in the rear. I'd suggest you get comfortable back there. She added a smile at the end, the kind with nothing behind it. Damon didn't respond. He put his headphones on and went back to his phone. That silence did something to Renee. You could see it shift in her posture. Her nostrils flared, her fingers curled. She was not used to being ignored. She was definitely not used to being ignored by someone she had already decided was beneath her. She turned, grabbed Damon's duffel bag off the seat beside him with both hands, and started walking toward the back of the plane. I'll get you settled in the rear. You'll be more comfortable. She didn't ask. She just started moving with his bag like the matter was decided. Damon stood. When he rose, the cabin changed. He was 6'1", broad, and even in a gray hoodie, there was something in the way he held himself that made the room feel smaller. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move toward her. He just said, clearly, firmly, with the kind of calm that doesn't need volume, put my bag down. I'm not going anywhere. Renee froze. She turned slowly, still holding the bag. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe. A flash of something uncomfortable, but her pride swallowed it fast. She dropped the bag. Not gently. She let it fall and hit the cabin floor with a hard thump that echoed through the jet. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. Don't make this into something it doesn't have to be. Trust me, you don't want that. She turned and muttered just loud enough for anyone nearby to catch it. This is exactly what happens when people don't follow the rules. From the galley entrance, a pair of wide eyes watched all of it. Priya Yoon, 25 years old, junior flight attendant, 7 months on the job. She stood completely still, holding a tray with 2 glasses on it, barely breathing. She had heard stories about Renee. She had seen Renee be short with certain passengers, but this was different. This was different. This was something she couldn't explain away. Priya wanted to speak. Her mouth opened slightly, but the words stayed locked inside her chest. Renee had 14 years of seniority. Renee had already gotten a junior crew member reassigned to cargo duty at a regional airport the previous spring. What everyone understood to be disagreeing with her in front of a client. There was no formal reason on paper, but everyone knew. So, Priya stood still, silent for now. Back in the main cabin, Damon sat back down, headphones on, phone in hand. His expression gave nothing away. The kind of stillness that could mean patience, or could mean something building very quietly behind a wall. Renee came back. Her face was flushed now. Her composure had thinned to something almost transparent. She planted herself in front of him and spoke loud, too loud for a private jet, loud enough that Captain Andre Webb might have heard from the cockpit if the door hadn't been sealed for pre-flight. I am telling you for the last time, show me valid identification proving you belong in this section, or I am radioing ground security and having you physically removed. That is your only option. Damon took his headphones off slowly, folded them, set them on the armrest. I'd like to speak to your captain. Renee's eyes went wide with something theatrical. You don't get to make that call. You're a passenger. I run this cabin and I am telling you right now you do not belong here. She pointed hard toward the rear of the plane. Move or I make the call. Damon looked at her. He really looked at her, long steady. Then he said barely above a whisper, do what you need to do. Something inside Renee snapped. Maybe it was the calm. Maybe it was the refusal to bend. Maybe it was the simple unbearable fact that he wouldn't give her what she needed, which was submission. She reached for his headphones on the armrest. Her hand shot out fast. Damon pulled back instinctively, a reflex. His arm brushed against her wrist as he moved. Barely contact. The kind of thing that happens when someone reaches into your personal space and you flinch. Renee recoiled like she'd touched fire. She stumbled back a step, eyes wide, mouth open in a way that looked rehearsed even if it wasn't. Then she swung, open palm, full force, across Damon Okafor's face. The sound cracked through the cabin like something breaking. Priya dropped both glasses in the galley. They shattered. Her hand went over her mouth. Her eyes filled instantly. Damon's head turned from the impact. A dark red mark bloomed across his left cheek. He sat completely still. 5 seconds, maybe more. Renee was breathing hard, chest moving fast, one hand still raised. She pointed her finger directly at his face. "Don't you ever put your hands on me. I saw what you did. You grabbed me. I have every right to defend myself." She smoothed her uniform, fixed her hair, and then her voice changed, controlled, practiced, like a completely different person had stepped into her body. "I'm calling security. When they get here, I'm telling them exactly what you did. You assaulted a crew member." Damon didn't speak. He reached slowly into his hoodie pocket, 2 fingers deliberate. He pulled out his phone. The screen was already on. The recording app was open. The red timer read 16 minutes, 44 seconds. He'd started it the moment she first marched toward his seat. He set the phone face up on the armrest. The microphone icon pulsed. He looked at Renee and said, so quietly it was almost gentle, "Everything you said, everything you did, the slap, the threat, the lie you're about to tell security, all of it is right here." He tapped the screen once. Audio and video. Renee stared at the phone. The rage was still there, but underneath it now something cold moved in, something she hadn't felt since the moment she walked onto this jet. Doubt. Damon leaned back in his seat, folded his hands and said, "I'd still like to speak to your captain." Most people stop when they realize they're being recorded. Renee Fulton was not most people. She stared at the phone for a long 3 seconds. The timer kept counting. Then she straightened her spine and smiled, hard, cold. The smile of someone who has talked her way out of worse. "Record all you want. We'll see who they believe. A 14-year senior crew member or some guy in a hoodie who pushed his way into the front section." She let the word hang. Some guy. Like he was nothing. Like he was nobody. She walked to the intercom panel near the galley and pressed the button for ground operations. When she spoke, her voice had completely transformed, softer, slightly shaky. The performance of a woman in distress. "Ground ops, this is Senior Attendant Fulton on CRS. I need security at the aircraft immediately. I have an unruly passenger in the owner's suite refusing crew instructions." A pause, then quieter like a confession. "He became physically aggressive. He grabbed me. I feel unsafe. Please send someone now." She released the button, took a breath. When she turned back to the cabin, her expression was composed, professional, and convincingly victimized. From the galley, Priya Yoon stood in the broken glass she hadn't swept up yet. Her hands were shaking. She had seen every second of what happened. She knew exactly what was real and what had just been invented for that intercom. She wanted to move. She wanted to speak. But she thought about Rachel, the junior attendant from the previous spring who ended up in Nebraska. She thought about her own rent, her own career, 7 months in. So she stood still, for now. 2 minutes later, boots on the air stairs. 2 ground security officers boarded. One older, calm eyes, name tag that read Greer. One younger, tense hand near his radio. Renee intercepted them before they were 2 steps into the cabin. She spoke fast, her voice landing somewhere between urgent and fragile. "Thank you for coming." The passenger in seat 2 pushed his way into the owner's suite. "I asked him to move multiple times. He refused, then grabbed my arm. He's been hostile. I want him removed immediately." Greer nodded, didn't rush, walked down the aisle to where Damon sat, still seated, still calm, phone recording on the armrest, tablet on his lap. "Sir, Officer Greer, Van Nuys Ground Security. Can I see some ID?" Damon reached into his back pocket. Slow, deliberate movements. He pulled out his wallet, opened it, and handed over his license. Greer looked at the photo, looked at the name, Damon Okafor. Something shifted behind Greer's eyes. He didn't change his expression, but he stepped 3 feet back, turned slightly, and keyed his radio low. "Ground ops, this is Greer. Need client verification on tail number Charlie Romeo Echo Sierra Tango. Confirm the registered charter owner for today's flight." Silence. 10 seconds. 15. Then the radio crackled. "Greer, tail number CRS is registered to Crestline Group. Today's sole charter client is Damon Okafor, CEO and principal owner of the registering company. He is the only authorized client on file for this flight." Greer lowered his radio. He stood still for a moment. Then he turned, not toward Damon, toward Renee. The look on his face was not rage. It was something quieter and more final than that. The look of a man who just understood exactly what he walked into. He moved past Renee without speaking and walked back to Damon. His tone was entirely different now. Mr. Okafor, I sincerely apologize for the interruption. Is there anything you need from us right now? Damon looked at him for a long moment. Then he said 3 words. Get her off. Quiet as a breath, heavy as a verdict. Greer nodded once. The younger officer turned to stare at Renee. His hand had dropped from his radio. His mouth was slightly open. And Renee. Renee stood near the galley with her arms frozen at her sides. The color drained from her face so completely she looked like something made of paper. Her lips moved. No sound came out at first. Then she stammered, Wait. That can't be right. He couldn't possibly be look at him. There is no way. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Everyone in that cabin heard what she couldn't make herself say. Priya stepped out of the galley. Slowly. Hands still trembling. But she stepped out. She looked directly at Officer Greer and she spoke. Her voice cracked at the start. Then it held. I need to tell you what actually happened. Renee's head snapped toward her. Priya, don't. Priya kept going. I saw all of it from the galley. Mr. Okafor was already seated when Miss Fulton approached him. He showed her his booking confirmation. She dismissed it. She picked up his bag without asking and tried to move it to the rear. He stood up and told her to stop. She dropped the bag on the floor. She came back, demanded he leave. He asked to speak to the captain. She reached for his personal belongings. He pulled back. That's all he did. He pulled back. He did not grab her. She slapped him. Then she told him she was going to report him for assault. The cabin was so quiet you could hear the ventilation system. Renee took 1 step toward Priya. Her voice came out like something hissed through locked teeth. You've been here 7 months. 7. You don't know how anything works here. When this is over, I will make absolutely sure you never. That's enough. Greer's voice landed like a door slamming. Miss Fulton, stop talking. At that exact moment the cockpit door opened. Captain Andre Webb stepped into the cabin. Headset still around his neck, face tight. He had been on the security radio channel for the last 90 seconds. He took in the scene in under a minute, and in that minute his expression moved from neutral to something cold and certain. He turned to Renee. Miss Fulton, you are relieved of duty effective immediately. Collect your belongings. You have 60 seconds to deplane. Captain, if you just let me. That was as not a request. Renee stood frozen for 5 of those 60 seconds. Her eyes moved around the cabin, to Greer, to Priya, to Damon. Damon wasn't looking at her. He was already back on his phone, already past her, like she was weather that had moved through. Renee grabbed her bag from the galley. Her movements were sharp and uneven now. The composure she had built over 14 years cracked all the way through in under a minute. She walked down the aisle toward the door, heels no longer confident, a retreat wearing the shape of a walk. At the top of the air stairs, she turned back. Her mouth opened. The cabin door swung shut. The last thing she saw was the back of Damon Okafor's head, still, quiet, unmoved. The jet lifted off at 7:18. Inside the cabin, after everything, the silence was soft. Priya brought Damon a cup of coffee. Her hands hadn't fully stopped shaking. Her voice came out small. Mr. Okafor, I'm so sorry. Damon looked up. For the first time that morning something in his face eased. He took the coffee. Thank you, Priya. What you did took real courage. She nodded and walked back to the galley before the tears fell. Damon set the coffee down, picked up his personal phone. Called his attorney, Kwame Briggs, 11 years. Second ring. Damon, it's early. What happened? Damon told him everything. Calm, precise, no heat in his voice. The tone of a man who has already decided what comes next. Kwame was quiet for a long moment. Then, I've watched you walk away from things like this more times than I can count. A pause. Don't walk away from this one. I wasn't planning to. Kwame moved fast. By the time the jet landed in Atlanta, 4 things were already in motion. A formal assault complaint filed with Van Nuys Airport Police. Full recording attached. A demand letter to Apex Skies Aviation's legal team. Written response required in 48 hours. A formal request for Renee Fulton's complete history and all prior complaints. A notice that Crestline Group was reviewing its charter management contract, which represented $11 million annually and was Apex Sky's single largest client relationship. The Atlanta deal closed without a single complication. 24 hours. That's how long it took. Apex Sky's legal team reviewed the recording 3 times. 3 lawyers. 1 conclusion. Undeniable assault. Falsified security report. No gray area. By noon the following day, Renee Fu. All. Elton was terminated, not suspended, not reassigned, terminated. 14 years, gone in a single phone call. When HR pulled her full file unfiltered, what they found went quiet in the room. 3 prior complaints from passengers of color, all investigated by the same mid-level manager, a man named Todd Garber, all closed with the same language. Insufficient evidence. No further action required. Todd Garber was placed on administrative leave the same afternoon. He never came back. 3 weeks later, the county DA filed 2 criminal counts against Renee Fulton. Simple assault. Filing a false report. The case lasted 3 days. The prosecution played the full recording for the jury. 16 minutes and 44 seconds. Uncut. Every word. The bag hitting the floor. The slap. The fabricated distress call. Priya took the stand, nervous, gripping the edge of the witness box. But her testimony was steady and unshakable. She never wavered. Then Renee took the stand. Under cross-examination, the prosecutor asked one question. Miss Fulton, can you explain why you assumed Mr. Okafor did not belong in the owner's suite of his own aircraft? Renee opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. He didn't look left. I mean, the way he was dressed. He didn't seem like. She stopped. 12 jurors stared at her. She never finished. She didn't need to. The jury deliberated for 70 minutes. Guilty. Both counts. 18 months probation. 200 hours community service at a civil rights education center. $15,000 fine. Permanent criminal record. Renee stood in the courtroom as the verdict was read. She didn't cry, didn't react, just stared straight ahead like a woman watching the last door in a long hallway swing shut. Damon gave one interview after the trial. Sandra Cho, investigative journalist. Short conversation. She asked what he wanted people to take from the story. He said, I don't want people to remember my name. I want them to remember that this almost disappeared. If I hadn't pressed record, it would have been her word against mine. And we both know how that usually goes. He flew private, still wore hoodies, still walked through terminals alone. His phone was always ready. Crestline Group crossed $4 billion in revenue the following year. 6 new markets. Damon didn't hold a press conference, didn't post about it, just kept building, the way he always had, quietly, with purpose. He is. Blish the Okafor Access Fund. $8 million dedicated to free legal representation for people facing racial discrimination in service industries, airlines, hotels, restaurants, people who didn't have a recording, people who didn't own the plane. In its first year, the fund took on 70 cases, 14 settled, 3 went to trial. All 3 won. Priya Yoon never went back to Apex Skies. She didn't have to. The charter company that absorbed Crestline's fleet management offered her a senior flight attendant position the same week she left, a title that would have taken her years to earn at her old company. She accepted the same day. When a trade magazine asked why she spoke up that morning knowing what it might cost her, she paused for a moment before answering. Because I saw what happened, and staying quiet would have made me part of it. Another pause. Silence isn't neutral. Silence is a choice. That morning I decided I was done making that choice. Renee Fulton fulfilled every requirement of her sentence. She applied to 4 airlines. All 4 rejected her. 3 hospitality companies. Same result. Her name had become a case study. Not a villain in a cautionary tale. A cautionary tale it's ELF, referenced in HR training, cited in corporate compliance documentation. A name people used when they wanted to explain what happens when bias goes unchecked and accountability finally shows up. A local reporter found her 8 months after the trial. She had moved to a small town 2 states away. She was working retail. She declined to comment. The reporter wrote one line about her. A woman living in the long shadow of a single morning. Damon closed his eyes on the flight back from Atlanta. He thought about his mother taking the bus home before sunrise. He thought about every room he had ever walked into, where someone looked at him the way Renee had looked at him that morning. He thought about every time he had let it go. He opened his eyes. Outside the window, the clouds broke open into clean, open sky. His phone rested on the armrest. The recording app was closed now, but his finger hovered near it anyway. Because in a world that decides who you are before you open your mouth, proof isn't optional. It's the only thing that stands between your truth and someone else's story about you.